Hello, everyone, and welcome to AP US History for Winners with your teacher, Mr. Johnson. Last time we talked about the Great Depression, and today we're going to talk about what FDR is going to try to do to solve this, and that's the New Deal. So if you are ready, let's begin. So let's think about what the New Deal is. It's really important that you are able to have a strong understanding of the definition of the New Deal. The New Deal is a series of programs that FDR is going to put in to try to end the Great Depression by increasing the power of the government. So you're going to see throughout this slide a lot of acronyms. Sometimes the New Deal is thought of as like alphabet soup because these are all agencies that the New Deal creates in the government to try to do things, again, to try to end the Great Depression. So it's in three general categories: relief, stimulate the economy, and reform the economy. All right, so we're going to break each one of those down in some examples, and I would maybe try to know at least one example of each one. Okay, so as far as relief for the poor, this is really going to be agencies that give the poor jobs. So there's agencies like the CCC, the PWA, and the WPA. Now, the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, they are going to be giving environmental work to people, like building camps, playgrounds, things like that. This work is often in segregated groups. So there's all black groups and all white groups. So some people view that as a negative. And then the Public Works Association and the Works Progress Administration are both agencies that use government money and workers that the government's hiring to build schools, to build roads, items like that. They're going to help give people jobs, but also help out America in general. The next general idea that the New Deal does is it tries to stimulate or improve the economy overall. So we have a couple of agencies here. The Agricultural Adjustment Act, the AAA, that actually pays farmers not to grow crops. That is a way to keep supply low, to try to keep farmers give farmers more money because the price of the crops would be higher. This actually gets overturned in a Supreme Court case called Butler versus United States. Not a super important Supreme Court case, but good to know that not all the things that Roosevelt tries to do in the New Deal are constitutional or get approved by the Supreme Court. The next agency here to stimulate the economy is the NIRA, the National Industrial Recovery Act. And this is an agency and a series of laws that limits the hours that people can get in these programs because they want to spread out the work to more people. And it also tries to increase people's purchasing power by creating minimum wages in these government jobs. So we see the idea of minimum wage coming in the NIRA so that people are paid a set amount and they can't go lower than that. Last general idea is how FDR tries to reform the economy. And this is really thinking about how is FDR thinking, well, I don't want this to happen again. How can we prevent a second Great Depression? So the FDIC, we talked about that agency last time. That's the agency that tries to insure banks so that people have more trust in their banks. Then there's the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. This is going to try to protect the stock market from fraud. We still have the SEC today. They try to make sure that people are not committing fraud with the stock market so that the stocks will be more stable and less volatile, less up and down. And lastly is the Social Security Administration. This is a really important one because we still use it today. Everybody, if you have a job, you should see in your paycheck, you get money taken out for Social Security. And this is used to help with a couple of things. One is retirement. So when you get to be a certain age, I think it's 67 right now in America, you get to be this age, you can start withdrawing from Social Security. And it also helps when you're unemployed. So if you get fired from your job without a reason that you got fired, let's say you get let go, you can collect unemployment. We saw a lot of people doing this during COVID, right? And how is all that paid for? Well, it's through Social Security. So people really value Social Security still to this day. It's one of the biggest successes of the New Deal. All right. Now, one thing to know about the New Deal is that there were some people who wanted FDR to go even further, and those are called the pushers, and there were some limiters who thought FDR was way overstepping his boundaries. And it's important to kind of understand these groups. So first, I really want you to make sure you are able to know who the limiters are, what type of people they are. So they're conservatives, and often at this time, the people in the Supreme Court, they want to limit change. Now, a conservative, what does that word mean? I'm not talking about today's politics, but any politics throughout history. A conservative wants to keep things the same. And in general, right, they want to keep things the same. And their conservatives in the 1930s think that FDR is going way too far. So we see Robert Taft, a Republican out of Ohio, and some conservative Democrats, they think that the New Deal is too much government power. It's government overreach. They think the New Deal is spending too much money because how are we paying for all those programs that we talked about on the last slide? Increased taxes or just deficit spending, just spending money that the government doesn't have. Okay. So, and how does we see the Supreme Court limiting some of FDR's ideas in the New Deal? By declaring the AAA and the NIRA unconstitutional. And so, again, these people want to limit what the New Deal is, how far it can go. Okay. And there's even another idea where FDR wanted to pack the Supreme Court because all this stuff is getting, we'll talk about that later. Sorry. So we'll talk about it at the end. All right. So the people who are pushers, okay, want FDR to go further. And these are usually unions and populist movements that they want more change. They want FDR to even put in more change. So some examples. Dr. Francis Townsend, he was the guy who kind of helped FDR come up with the creation of Social Security. Another guy is named Huey Long, the senator from Louisiana. He has an interesting idea, $5,000 to every family. And he wants to pay for that by taxing the wealthy. That sounds really similar to stimulus checks that we saw during COVID, doesn't it? So that was an idea to help people in the New Deal. And then the last, that's the idea I kind of fumbled on that I want to talk about, the court packing plan. So FDR knows that a lot of his ideas are getting rejected in the Supreme Court or in federal courts. And so he comes up with this idea. For every judge over 70 years old that does not retire, he's going to appoint a new judge. And in the Supreme Court, this would allow him to appoint up to 6 new judges to the Supreme Court. And if he appoints new judges, they're obviously going to favor his policies. Now, people think of this as a huge overreach. Think of this as FDR trying to take a lot of power over the government because now he's putting in judges that think just like him that are going to declare all his new agencies and laws okay. Now, this is called the court packing plan, and it doesn't actually happen, okay? He wants it to happen, but there's a big public outcry. And you can kind of see that on the right here, all right? People see FDR, okay, he's reorganizing the government. Maybe that's okay. He's creating these agencies. Maybe that's good. But they get afraid that he's taking the next step to revising the Supreme Court, right? Putting in all his own people on the Supreme Court. And they're seeing FDR as someone who's on his way to dictator status, like being in control of everything in the United States, okay? So people are very hesitant and worried about how much power FDR has. All right, last idea here is the impact of the New Deal. And it's important to know that the New Deal does not end the Great Depression. It's going to take until World War II for the Great Depression to end, but it does start to provide some relief, some reform, okay? But it doesn't end it all by itself. Now, one group we really need to know about as far as the impact of the Great Depression is African Americans, all right? So they're helped in some ways, not helped as much as they could in other ways. Okay. So 25% of African Americans did get government assistance in 1935 in the middle of the New Deal. However, the New Deal does not make lynching a federal crime, which is the hanging of African Americans by kind of mob vigilante violence and vigilante justice. Okay. It does not end poll taxes. So that's when you have to pay to vote. There's segregation in the CCC, and in a lot of these government jobs, African Americans were paid less money than whites. And so some African Americans are upset with the state of politics, feel like the New Deal does not do enough to help them. But at the same time, people, African American community are getting assistance, right? So there's some pros and some cons in terms of African American community. Okay. As far as women go, one key person to know about is Frances Perkins. She's very important because she becomes the first female cabinet member ever in U.S. history, and she was the Secretary of Labor. Okay, so FDR does do a really good job of trying to bring women into the fold in some ways. Okay, Eleanor Roosevelt, his wife, one of the most famous first ladies ever, thought of it as his eyes and his ears, and Eleanor Roosevelt did a lot to help out people, especially people with disabilities. Okay, but just like with African Americans, most women did not receive government jobs. Most women did not receive the support that they thought they should have from the New Deal, because there was this idea that during the economic issues like the Great Depression, that men should be getting the jobs instead of women. Okay, so see, African Americans, women, there's some pros, there's some cons. Maybe a lot of people feel like it doesn't go far enough to help these groups. Last important idea, the impact of the New Deal, is it's going to realign the political parties, right? So I want you to think about, if we think about in the 1860s, what was the party that most African Americans would have been a part of? Most of the working class would have been a part of. Okay, that would have been the Republican Party in the 1860s because they're the party that is ending slavery of Abraham Lincoln, right? But with the New Deal and with FDR, he's president for 4 terms. Okay, he's president longer than any other president. A lot of the African Americans and a lot of the people in the working class start to support FDR and the Democrats. And FDR builds what's called this huge coalition, okay, because he's getting the working class, he's getting women, he's getting African Americans, he's getting a lot of groups that were traditionally Republican. And the Democrats are winning election after election after election. Even though there are some people who think that the Democrats are going too far with government power, the Democrats are really taking over U.S. politics, and it's even going to go further into World War II. So we'll see. We'll talk about this more in future lessons, but the Republican Party is going to need to redefine itself. They're going to need to think about what issues and values they want to stand up for because they're losing to the Democrats so often, okay, because of the New Deal. All right, so that is it for our notes on the New Deal. Let's go over our big ideas. Make sure we get these down. First, 1 sentence. Explain the New Deal. You should be able to do that. Number 2, who is supporting the New Deal? What are their beliefs? Why? Who did not support the New Deal? What are their beliefs? And third, name one specific thing, like name an agency that the New Deal does and describe it. Okay? Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.